Chief Campos had a meeting, I think Monday or Tuesday, with Dan Hoffman, who's the university. What, Chief, why don't you update us, since I don't know their titles?
Yeah, he's the, I may mutilate his title, but he's the director of transportation on the university, and under his venue is on-campus parking, transportation, bus services, roads, etc. And he works for, I believe, the planning department, where that's where Mr. Knutson comes in. He's the new interim director for the planning department. But Dan, Dan's experience, he comes from a variety of large metropolis cities and has a wealth of experience with traffic management systems, traffic studies, etc. And one of the things that I found encouraging, and Chad, you may have heard this from him in the Green Crescent Trail, is the university is very much interested in connecting pedestrian bikeways to the campus from the city, so that their students can use that, because they have some data that proves that their students want to use those methods and modes of transportation to get onto campus, but they can't because those connections don't exist, or they're cumbersome, or they're undesirable. And so they're willing and able, are willing to have those conversations. So that was just a small snippet of what we talked about. And since a lot of what this group is working on is in that same ballpark, I didn't want us to, put that plan together and then go to them and then hit a roadblock somewhere, when we can kind of work that out ahead of time. And if we need to exert some energy or political capital towards that roadblock, then we can do that instead of start from square one. But Dan and I have talked a couple of different times since I've had discussions about traffic flow issues in the city and how the university's schedule and stuff affects that, and when people are coming in and coming off of campus. So he and I have talked several times about stuff like that. And we also had a recent conversation about speed bumps and what the university's position on speed bumps are, because we get hit over the head in the city about putting speed bumps everywhere, and speed bumps are not applicable to every circumstance. And one of the things I learned was from him is, because I asked him, how did the university come about putting speed bumps there? What did they do, et cetera? And to shorten that conversation, they did a traffic study, and the engineers that did the traffic study took into account the number of pedestrians and bicyclists in those corridors that were crossing those roadways. And that is what drove putting the speed humps there. And a lot of the things that I get hit with in the city that want speed humps, we don't have that pedestrian traffic to warrant a speed bump like that. So that was very eye-opening and very helpful. So when I explained to our citizens who are demanding speed bumps that, the difference between the university and us is the foot traffic. And if we had the foot traffic, and it may warrant it, because they are applicable in certain situations, but they're not applicable in all situations. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
So the discussion then is when and how we want to get Dan and Peter involved with what we're doing. And I guess there are some alternatives. One would be to basically invite them to join us once we get into the next part. Second might be that, there is a separate ClemsonNext committee that's looking at town-gown relationships that will be a mixture of members of the university and ClemsonNext. Or the third might be to have conversation, and Shannon, you obviously be part of this, with Peter and Dan about where we are right now. So I don't know how we want to proceed, but I think the point the chief made is a good one. We don't want to be wasting time on decisions that have already been made, or we don't want to be missing an opportunity to lobby for some decisions we think should be made at a level that maybe we could do that. So I'm going to turn the meeting to you, Shannon, anyway, but I don't know how you think it's best to proceed, but Dan and Peter, I don't know who I know at all. They've made the offer, And I think it's to our advantage to get them involved as soon and as early and as comprehensively as possible. So Shannon, I'm going to turn it to you for your thoughts and maybe what you might think, because this actually relates to some other groups, maybe besides this committee.
Thanks, Fran. I agree, and we should definitely get them involved soon. We have some meetings next week set up with the University Town Relationships Committee to start getting that off the ground. Let me take this to them and take this to the Implementation Committee with some ideas. What I'd like to do is decide on our path and move forward on that with Dan and Peter instead of throwing 3 meetings from 3 different groups at them. So let me bring this back to you guys when we meet again with some recommendations and some information on what the other committees are doing.
Okay, that sounds good. And Chief, thanks for doing that. We probably should have thought of that sooner, to be honest with you, but better later than never, I guess. So Shannon, I'll turn it to you, since I know you sort of want to lead us through the discussion on priorities and what we're going to be doing. Before we do, I just want to say, Gray, I like the outfit. You look natty in the hat and the mask. That's a good look for you. Very nice. Shannon, to you.
Okay, I sent out earlier this week the recommendations that we agreed on last week. And what I did was I put them in the same document as the original ClemsonNext white paper recommendations. So we could see very clearly what we agreed on with the original recommendations and what we kind of took a step further or what we wanted to add. So I had Fran sent me one comment about something we'll discuss a little bit later about adding in. Did y'all see anything that you wanted updated or changed? Basically, that second group of recommendations, the one that has the yellow and the orange in it. Oh, thanks, Fran. Will be the recommendations that we are going to forward on to Planning Commission and Council for them to adopt. So the first 3 under Invest in Transit are really the same recommendations, just with a little bit more clarification on how we would like to see the CAT bus system expanded, a recommendation on a potential policy for the university on reducing the number of freshmen with cars. And in number 3, adding that we think development should be encouraged in areas where bus lines and bike paths are already available. So does everybody pretty much agree with those top 3 under Invest in Transit?
Yes.
Okay.
Do those include asking the city to increase their investment in transit? I see asking other cities and the university to increase, but y'all have already discussed this. I missed that meeting, but did I miss that somewhere?
I think we may have implied that, but we did not specifically say that. Are you all comfortable with adding that into the number 1, that the city increases its investment in transit and works with Clemson University and neighboring jurisdictions to expand theirs?
I certainly think we should do that, because I think it's hard to go to the university and other places without saying we're spending any money. I know we get grants, but I think we got to have skin in the game before we can ask them to do the same.
And I think just to sort of expand a little bit, so the recommendation in the white paper, if you remember, this was based on the comparison with Virginia Tech and a couple other universities' bus systems and how comparatively we were below those. This was expanded, and I expanded the yellow part because I thought we wanted more than just sort of funding for this, but we also wanted them to be doing things like scheduling, availability of routes, and other kind of things, and that's part 2. So I think the university part of it was the white paper thought, that it comes to next people, because they did the financial comparison. So I think the addition of the city is something that we should add to this that I don't think was in the original, because that wasn't what they focused on. So I'm comfortable with that suggestion. But I think the part 2 of this is I think the addition that is crucial, because it's not just money we're asking for. We're asking for looking at the system and how it operates and where it goes and how frequent it goes and the mix of vehicles and all kinds of things.
Any other comments on what Fran just talked about? Also expanding the CAT bus system itself, not just the funding.
I think that all makes sense.
Anybody have any major disagreements with those first three or think that we should not recommend them? All right.
Good for me.
All right, moving on then to the second part, expanding bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And this is where we really added more additional recommendations. So let's first focus on the first one, number one, because there's an area of that we did not discuss in detail. We did discuss, yes, we think we should recommend funding the implementation of the downtown corridor plan and the Green Crescent Trail. We did not discuss prioritizing segments that improve the walkability and bikeability of 93. I think that was implied in a lot of our discussions. I just wanted to double check with the committee and make sure you wanted to make that a priority area.
I like that addition. I think that's good.
So have we identified a segment of 93 that we're going to focus on?
I think looking at this and looking at the catalyst areas recommended in the white paper, it's pretty much going to be 93 from the university to Central.
Okay. I think we all know that since it's a state road, we have to deal with the machine, for lack of a better description. So, you know.
Right. And actually, Chad, you can help me out with this, but I think GPATS has already designated money in 2022 to study pedestrian and biking paths on 93. Is that correct, Chad?
It is. It's in the I don't know what they call that, but the short-term planning for the GPATs. They have, I think, $150,000 allocated in 2022 to do the study, and then they have a placeholder in the next following 3 or 4 years for actual funding of the implementation of a trail alongside of Highway 93, which is what's called for in the Green Crescent Trail plan. But it's not, there's no funding put in there. It says to be determined based on the plan. So it's at least it's in the GPAS plan, which is a big deal because there's a lot. I don't know if you all saw an article in Anderson. They have Anderson County used similar funds for their transportation authority. It was $5.5 million to expand their crosstown walking biking path. And so the same type of funding we're talking about here could potentially be used for Highway 93 improvements. So I think the only thing I would add about, as someone who's worked a lot on the Green Crescent Trail, Highway 93 is definitely a priority. So if we as a committee think based on the perspective of ClemsonNext, that Highway 93 is the top priority, like that's great because it already is part of the priority of the Green Crescent Trail. The other thing though is like downtown from the university's perspective and getting traffic off the roads, both downtown Highway 133 and 93 are both equally, I mean, they're both big commuter routes. So I guess by us mentioning the downtown corridor plan, maybe we're implying that, but I think it even goes beyond the downtown corridor plan. It includes going up into Old Calhoun, connecting to a lot of the apartments over there. So if we're going to make that sounds like we're trying to make recommendations specific, and just both of those corridors are really critical for commuting in the short run.
Anybody else feel like we should add to that and say we should prioritize segments that improve the walkability and bikeability of 93 and 133 into the downtown corridor?
I think if you add the 133, like Chad kind of mentioned, I would just put sort of a stopping point to it, like up to Old Calhoun, or, I mean, 133 is a pretty long corridor.
Okay.
A concern I would have, and this is going to be sort of general too, is that if we tie it to, particularly I'm thinking the downtown corridor plan, I'm not very familiar with that plan, but I'm assuming it includes lots of stuff besides the walkability, and it's expensive. No matter what it is, it's going to be expensive. And I guess I would hate our recommendations to be behind or be so attached to the downtown corridor plan that nothing gets done until the downtown corridor plan is up and running, which is going to be years, I would guess. So I guess my concern would be if we're affiliated in our priority to that, are we risking that the timing of this will have to wait on the approval of funding for the downtown corridor plan, whereas other things, including bikeability and walkability, could be done in that area, but separated from the plan? I know that's not maybe the best way, but I get worried when we tie our recommendations to something that's going to be more expensive and not likely in the near future, given all the other expenses of the city. Whereas Green Crescent Trail makes sense because the funding is already coming for that and the approval, but I don't know, Chad, maybe you do, Chief, maybe you do. I have no idea if there's any kind of schedule for the downtown corridor plan. I mean, I've heard that word for years. And if it's not on the near horizon, do we really want to tie our recommendation to that?
I know very little, but I did have a conversation with Andy about the downtown corridor plan, and he said that there are aspects of that that are still being looked into and moving forward, but exactly what those are and that kind of stuff, I don't know. It's part of some of the redevelopment that's going on down there.
What if we change that section in orange to say prioritizing segments that improve the walkability and hang on, let me back up, that improve the walking and biking connections between the city and campus between the city and campus, particularly along 93 and I don't know, to the student housing on 133. But do we want to emphasize that this is connecting, these are the two areas that are really connecting the students to campus?
I think those are the two areas to emphasize. And I share your concern, Fran, about the downtown corridor plan, because we've been trying to, it's been sitting on the shelf for a while. And one of the big objections I always heard was we needed a parking lot before we did the downtown corridor plan, because it takes some of the parking off the roads, particularly on like Lower College Avenue going down towards the old Astro. Some of that parking is called to be removed. And so I think it was just a sensitive topic anyway. And I've always thought there should be like some plan, version 1.0 of the downtown corridor plan, instead of doing $10 million or nothing, And so perhaps the Green Crescent Trail plan is in downtown. So like it includes College Avenue. So could we just say the fund implementation of the Green Crescent Trail, prioritizing segments that improve walkability and bikeability of Highway 93 and College Avenue up to Old Calhoun, something like that. I don't know, that'd be my preference, but the downtown corridor plan is although I'd love to see it implemented, making it a priority it's going to be a roadblock. Maybe it needs to be a separate priority or something, because it's going to be putting it in there with the Green Crescent Trail is going to hurt the chances of having it be implemented, I think.
Do you want to separate these out? So we have one that is fund implementation of the Green Crescent Trail, prioritizing segments that improve walkability and bikeability of 93 and 133 up to Old Calhoun. And then we could have a number 2, we'd move that down. That would be fund implementation of the downtown corridor plan, or we could suggest that they look at breaking the downtown corridor plan down into phases that could be more easily funded.
So my preference would, and I saw Chad's thumb up, but my preference would be honestly to not mention the downtown corridor plan. I think that's already on the books. I think we would lose some of the power and the focus on our other priorities by putting that in there. And I'm going to ask part 2 of that question I'm asking Chad. Is that the preference for the Green Crescent Trail, prioritizing those areas as opposed to other areas? So is that sort of where you all are in your own planning, or are we now doing something that may not be the Green Crescent's preference? So anyway, 2 things. I would prefer us not to even mention the downtown plan and get involved in that at this point. If it happens, we'll have lots of other chances, but I'm also concerned, Chad, that we're being congruent with Green Crescent Trail's planning and preferences.
We have other people on the Green Crescent Trail, so I don't want to monopolize that. Like Lisa or Shannon, if y'all want to chime in here too, but I do have some thoughts on the prioritization. But what do y'all want to comment first before I do?
Go for it, Chad.
Okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong. I'm just one person on this group, but it's 93. We've always said that if Highway 93 got implemented, like the Green Crescent Trail is 1/2 recreational project, 1/2 mobility transportation project. And some phases are much more recreational than transportation. And these two are very much transportation, get people to campus oriented. Highway 93, College Avenue. So in that respect, it makes the most sense from the ClemsonNext perspective, which is all about, one of the main things is trying to reduce traffic for the city. This emphasis perhaps could reduce some of the emphasis on the Nettles Park to Ashley Deering connection, which is one of the next kind of phases that we're working on. And I know that's potentially, is that going to potentially, push that one back a little bit? Maybe, I don't know. That could be I don't know if that's how that would play out, but if this one actually got funded earlier, I'm just speaking for myself, so y'all chime in as well. I'd be happy that we got something big done one way or the other. But if this is such a big project that it got pushed back 5 years and nothing got done for 5 years, that would be a shame. But because the Highway 93 is a big deal, it's going to be planned next year. It might take 3 to 4 years. Let's say they did want to do some major dramatic changes to Highway 93. That would take a while to happen. Whereas some of the other projects in town, like connecting Nettles Park to Ashley Deering, could maybe happen in a year or two. I think that's the difference here between these two parts of the Green Crescent plan.
I would say from my perspective, I could see these things happening simultaneously, but in terms of what you just described, the two separate projects, that one, the Ashley Deering and Nettles Park connection, that is purely recreational, really, or mostly, I guess I would say, versus, or as compared to the 93. I feel like naming the 93 as a priority in this recommendation set is really important.
I think one of the things to consider is we are not, although the Green Crescent Trail is transportation and recreation, as a committee, we were tasked with transit, traffic, and transportation. So if we want to focus in and look at it that way, as the, maybe the recreation aspect of it, I can take over to maybe the housing and neighborhood preservation group. But we can make sure that gets included in a different area.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Shannon.
That's a good point. Excellent. All right.
All right, so we're going to go back to, I guess, the original two things. And I'm going to ask for just a yes or no, thumbs up, thumbs down on this. Do you guys want to take out the downtown corridor plan recommendation? So this would just say fund implementation of the Green Crescent Trail, prioritizing segments that improve the walkability and bikeability. Can I get some yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down on that? Okay, I got one. Gray? Okay, you want to keep it in? Lisa?
I'm trying to figure out my thumbs up
Okay.
thing. I'm fine taking it out. I do think it would be valuable to, if necessary, or if we feel like for the transportation and all we've been tasked with, if we need to include something that does speak to improved pedestrian and bike infrastructure in that downtown area, we could put something in, but I'm totally okay with taking out the reference to the entire downtown corridor plan.
I agree.
Bill, what do you think?
I think we need to keep the downtown corridor aspect in.
Okay.
I think that's, I mean, I don't know how much emphasis it should have. I think 93 is our biggest emphasis, but I do think the downtown corridor up through where the, where the top of the road is on 33 there, that traffic light is, all that's important. A lot of people are living in that area, have to get down to the university. And there's a lot of people walking through there that I see. When I come through, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic coming across 123 headed in there to the downtown area. So I think that's a important area to work on. I think the area between Ashley Deering and Nettles it's be a great idea eventually, but I don't know if that's something we need to work with right now. I do think that's something we need to consider in the future for sure.
Thanks, Bill. Gray, you wanted to comment?
I just vote to keep it in because I live so close to there and I cross 123 all the time, and it's pretty challenging. I've biked downtown many times, and it's dangerous. Straight up biking through downtown, you feel like you're one annoying people to gonna get hit at any second. So I'm flex either way. So if the priority, if our energies would be better focused somewhere else, then it's okay to not include it.
What do you all think about just making these two separate recommendations? So we still recommend the downtown corridor plan, but we separate it out from the Green Crescent Trail.
Yes, please. Let's do that.
Okay. Is everybody good with that? We keep it in, but we separate the two?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's good.
I like Chad's suggestion too in the chat box of maybe breaking the downtown corridor plan into bite-sized pieces that prioritize kind of what Gray was just speaking to, like the safety component of biking and walking. I don't know what all else is included in the corridor plan, but if it's a lot of beautification and that sort of thing, then maybe our group focuses on recommending the pieces that are most applicable to safe alternative transportation.
Shannon, this is the chief. I think I understand where Fran is coming from. And these plans may not be, although they're pretty solidified, they may not. So why don't we consider a statement that says funding any plan that prioritizes walkability and bikeability, because there are segments of the downtown corridor plan that improve walkability and bikeability. So, making a statement that says we prioritize initiatives and fundings for any plan that would increase walkability, bikeability to and from campus, or something along those lines. And that way the individual projects themselves are not named in there.
Okay, so
I like that, Chief Campo.
thanks, Gray. Ensley, what do you think? Oh, you're on mute, Ensley.
I think it's a good idea.
To keep it in and to do it the way the chief just suggested?
Yes, I think Chief has a good idea.
Okay. Everybody else? Lisa?
I think, Shannon, you got me as keeping it in, correct?
Yep. So I think what we're just discussing now is taking out the names of the particular plans. And so our number one would read, prioritize initiatives and funding that promote the walkability and bikeability between the city and campus, something like that, or to and from campus. I'll play around with that a little bit, but we would take out the words downtown corridor plan and Green Crescent Trail, and instead just focus on those connections where the city and the campus connect. So that would be 93. It would be what we were talking about with 133. It might include 28 and 76 in the housing over there. So it does broaden it a little bit.
Shannon, okay, I think I missed part of that. I do like the idea of naming the Highway 93 corridor.
Okay.
I feel like that's really important.
So
because of all of the things that the ClemsonNext, where it's directing like the catalyst areas and redevelopment of that whole entire corridor. And I just worry that if we keep it broad, it really opens it up and doesn't give the kind of clear direction that would, I don't know, be necessary to make strategic investments.
What do you think about removing the words downtown corridor plan and Green Crescent Trail?
That doesn't bother me so much at all.
Okay. So what if we take those out and instead we put in what we seem to have consensus on as a committee, which is these should focus on the Highway 93 corridor and the connection from 133 through downtown to campus. We focus on location instead of the name of the plan. I got a thumbs up from Bill.
Good with that.
Chad's okay. Ensley's okay. Gray, thumbs up. Brad, what do you think?
Do you think it is a bad idea to remove Green Crescent Trail? Question mark.
Sure, go for it.
Okay.
The actual language. I mean.
Chief, does that sound good with you, keeping your attention? All right, that's what, I will change that and send that out to everyone. So the next ones, the second one, it stays the same. We discussed this recommendation in student-centered catalyst areas, establish requirements for developers to put infrastructure in place alongside development. That's the same. And then 3 through 7 on Fran's list are additional recommendations the committee has come up with. So continue to add and upgrade bike and pedestrian pathways in neighborhoods, connector roads, and main thoroughfares. Provide access to public transportation through the provision of bus shelters, transportation nodes, and neighborhood connectivity. Foster a culture of alternative transportation focused on biking and walking. Integrate land use decisions with transportation priorities. And create citywide signage clearly indicating the location of bike and walking paths, access to bus stops, routes to parks and areas of interest, etc. Does everybody feel good about including these as additional recommendations to City Council that go beyond what the white paper said?
So let me ask a question about number 7. I assume, because we talked about it earlier, we're promoting signage that would also direct vehicular traffic to transportation hubs like the parking deck and those types of things, to where they can switch their mode of transportation. So if they're coming from far out locations in, we have that signage where they can utilize those resources.
We can certainly add that language to number 7. I think when we talked about number 7, we were focused on the idea of it's hard to get around on foot because there's no foot traffic signs. But we can, if everybody's okay, we can add the vehicular transportation kind of directions to parking hubs and things like that.
I think it kind of ties in with number 5 and 6, but it's just, it's molding them all together. And it's not excluding vehicular traffic, because I don't want that message to go out either, because then we'll get some resistance from those that prefer vehicular transportation.
Everybody okay with adding that to number 7?
So Shannon, I just had another quick thought. I wrote this as a guy that was born in 1950. I think for people born in 2020, maybe the electronic media like My Civic is more important than actual just signs. So maybe include sort of the city's, My Civic's a good example that I would think many people would use that to find a bus stop, for instance. So maybe we need to expand this to the city's media also.
Okay, so maybe we add some language here, besides creating citywide signage, to explore how to, okay, Chad just wrote citywide wayfinding. So maybe create citywide wayfinding, both like physical so you can see it and digital somehow.
Yeah, so most cities that have traffic engineer or traffic engineering departments will connect this information to Google and Apple and those type of things to include it. But I agree with Chad. The more you integrate this information into those common apps that everybody uses, because when I go to large cities, I pull my phone out and pull out Google and figure out what the walking route is to a particular location or the mass transportation part of it. So we probably need to emphasize those mediums of information.
Okay. So I will work on number 7 to update that and send it back out to everybody. If everybody's good with expanding that recommendation to include more than just physical signs. Looks like we're all okay with that.
I was just going to say that I agree with all these recommendations, and my mind automatically goes to like, how are you actually going to implement them? Like, you recommend city council to do these, and I was just on a positive note, like, I feel like at least 3 or 4 of these, a lot of the work that we're doing with the Friends of the Green Crescent Trails, that's exactly what our effort is. Like the foster a culture of alternative transportation focused on biking and walking. That's pretty much the mission of what we're doing, you know. And then the biking, all the specific pathways, and then also the signage and wayfinding. We're working really hard on getting a map system with the city engineers that could be used publicly with an app, for example. And then also trying to do some pilot programs with signage around town. There's one that was done in Raleigh, North Carolina, called a Walk Your City campaign. And so one idea is to start downtown at the parking garage and say, hey, it's only a 2-minute walk or a 10-minute walk to Abernathy Park, or it's only a 2-minute walk to Shanklin Sam's, or it's only a 3-minute walk to the campus, and have those be kind of try to integrate that in the entire city so that people know, hey, it's only a 5-minute walk to go there. Why don't I just park my car and do that? So I guess it's just an encouragement of what these are, that there's a means to implement these, I think, through what we're doing as well.
Yeah, so I think our first high level step is to get council to adopt these, and then we will come back together as a group and strategize on how to implement that. And we'll be working with city staff on that and with the university staff too as well when we get to that point. All right, are there any recommendations that we've missed? And then we're going to go back and talk about one that was added in later. Everybody feel comfortable with what's on this document so far? Lisa?
I just have a question. It's on number 3 and 4, if there's any way to be a little more specific about, those are just very, very broad. And maybe that's fine. But I think that if, you know, is there any, I felt like when we were talking about number 4 and like bus shelters, people threw out specific locations that might be particularly helpful. I'm not sure if it's within the scope of this committee to get more detailed on that, but I do worry that kind of, you know, continuing to add and upgrade bike and pedestrian pathways, like what does that mean? Is that like a mile a year? Is that particular neighborhoods really need more help than others, or?
That's a good question. I mean, I think number 3 could be an upon request. Since I believe the city does have a sidewalk request program for neighborhoods. The other thing is we could mark those as items that after these are adopted, we come back and our committee works with different groups through the city to outline what exactly those neighborhoods are and where those bus shelters could be.
I think that's a good point. I think these are goals, and then the specifics come afterwards. Because I'm afraid if you put your specifics in your goals, then you lock yourself in. And if something else emerges in the future, near future, you know, some people may go back and say, well, this is what your goal was. This is what we're going to focus on.
Yeah, I think if there's that next step that is definitely going to happen, and Chad put something in the in the chat box, and that was kind of what I was getting at. Like, this kind of goal shows up in every plan, in every city, in every jurisdiction, and nothing ever happens, or rarely anything happens unless there's like a directive next step that like, and someone's, you know, that we're going to outline specifics.
Well, I think, and then just from a city employee perspective, it seems like to our populace that it doesn't happen, but there's usually a reason why, and dollars are usually the reason why. And some people have the opinion that, well, we're not putting enough emphasis on it because we're not putting the dollars there. So you get those competing priorities that come into it. And I know we've had our city engineer, when we start talking about putting sidewalks in and that kind of stuff, the stormwater comes into play, the other utilities come into play, and it becomes this big, huge dollar sign. And so when we start getting into specifics and we force them to do that, all those other things are going to come into play, and then we're going to talk about large dollars. And then everything that we want done may get scaled down because those dollars are going to get funded for one particular project. And that's why I'm saying we got to be careful about that. I understand it's open to interpretation, but I think maybe that's where, and Fran, you can step in. That's where council steps in and says, well, this is a priority. This is where we're going to focus, and have the council make those decisions.
And I think, Lisa, too, that, and again, Shannon can correct me, my understanding is after these are approved by council and planning commission, and they may not even approve all of these, I can't speak for that, then our committee will walk back on these and start coming up with specific strategies and implementation. So I think if we don't have something on here, nothing will ever happen. If we have something on here and can then tie actionable items to it, then it's likely something might happen. But I think, Shannon, the plan was to come back to this committee after whatever length of time with the things that are approved. And then we go through that process of what strategies, some of which are in the comp plan, we would recommend to do these. And it may be actually, as we try to attach strategies, we find we don't have any strategies, so we can't do them. Anyway, I think to not have this here would mean it won't happen. And I think the plan is to step back into this after we hear back from council with more actionable, identifiable, measurable outcome kind of things as opposed to the goals. I believe.
Yeah,
that's the
I
plan.
feel really comfortable as long as there's a next step that's going to happen, like you just described, Fran, or Shannon described. I do just think it's really easy with these vague kind of,
Right.
you know, goals for it to go nowhere.
I agree. I agree.
Any other thoughts before we move on? And we're going to discuss number 3 on our agenda, which is we had a recommendation that under the top 3, invest in transit, we add an item that says find partners to help fund and conduct a regional traffic study along 123. This committee will make further recommendations upon completion of that study. So 3 or 4 weeks ago, and back when we started, we were focused on the traffic along 123 and options for us along 123. And we discussed having the regional traffic study done there, but then we didn't include it in our recommendations. So is that something we still want to include in these recommendations, to have that under our belt to use to make decisions for that corridor later on?
Yes.
Anybody else? Bill, I think I see a yes from Bill. Lisa and Chad, we're okay with this? Okay.
I know, Shannon, and just talking with people in general, they're often very concerned about what the traffic committee and whatever these committees are going to do with 123. They talk about it all the time, and I think we need to have. I know we're waiting on a traffic study actually to come from 123, and I honestly don't know what we can do with 23, but 123. But I think if we don't put something in there, people are really want something positive coming from us as much as possible about 123. That's just what I'm feeling from other people as I talk to them.
Okay, that's great. Fran, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's good. Lisa, did I send you the recommendation that Dee made?
That's what, yeah. So his recommendation was actually that we go a step further. I'm walking us back a little bit to just fund the traffic study. DeWitt made the recommendation that the city start to acquire right-of-way for bypass land. But I felt like before, we don't even know where that could potentially go until we do the study. That fair?
Yeah, I think the way we're doing it, and actually I think it was at our April 12th meeting as a group, we agreed to this, so it makes sense that that is part of the recommendations. And then this is on the agenda, RFP for the study, I think Monday night for council, so that's good to have that done before Monday.
Okay. So my only question on that wording would be, do we want it just that the city funds it, or that the city funds it and finds partners to help fund it? Is that?
My one thought about that, and this is what my only concern, I mean, I think we should include it for all the points that have been made, but you know, that'll be expensive, as people have mentioned, and I just really would not want money, you know, diverted to another study if it is at the expense of all of the other priorities we have on our list that will get actual things on the ground. That might not happen, but I like the idea of, instead of saying the city will solely fund, to find partners and leverage dollars and all of that.
Okay. Fran, does that seem reasonable?
I will see.
Go ahead, Ensley.
I was going to say, I can see what the county can do for it.
Okay. So does it seem reasonable to everyone that that's written as the city funds and tries to find partners to help fund this the regional study?
Brad, does that make sense to you? You've been heading this up.
Yes, absolutely. Try to find some of the close by neighbors, Pendleton Central. I don't think we're going to get anything from Oconee. Not going to get anything from DOT, but possibly Pendleton Central, maybe. And the university too. I think they should be a huge player and help funding with the city.
Okay. And the county as well, is what Ensley just.
Correct. Yes, correct.
Might be a possibility.
Yep.
Okay.
Good deal.
All right. So that's it, guys. We made it through all the recommendations. I will clean these up and send you a cleaned up list that just has our final recommendations on it. If you guys have any issues, concerns about wording, you can sure send those edits back to me and I will wordsmith away. Fran, do you want to have another meeting and take a vote, or do you feel like we all agree on these, and unless there's a major suggestion,
Well,
we're good to forward these?
The only other question, and we mentioned this briefly, is whether we want to prioritize these recommendations in any sense or just send them out the way they are. I have some issues with prioritizing because I think it sort of forces some issues, but there are also some benefits to prioritizing in the sense of the most important things move up to the top. So do we want to do that? Maybe do that later? What is your feeling about these items in terms of some order to them?
I like the general idea of, I don't know that we should spend time doing that, but we did discuss today prioritizing specific corridors, and I don't know, some kind of statement that's saying whichever one of these improves transit on these corridors. I mean, that to me has been one of the most important. 123 is an important corridor as well, but 93 and College Avenue, it keeps coming back to those two in my mind.
I think at some point, and it might not be this point, I'm not sure if it's prioritizing and or adding some like time goal, like so that within 2 years we aim to do this, within 10 years, whatever, because with no timeline, again, things can just sort of draw out forever, and potentially we will need to prioritize the ones that require funding.
One idea is after these are adopted by council, we can work with city staff and see what type of funding is out there for these and what might come from the same bucket and what might have separate buckets. And then maybe our committee looks at that and decides if there's 2 or 3 projects that would come out of the same bucket of money, we could make a priority at that point, or a recommendation at that point when it comes to.
I like that. So the only issue that's going to come then, and Shannon, you may know better than I do, is the timing of all this. Planning Commission, I think, just meets once a month, the second Monday. And I think they have a pretty wide window that things have to be on their agenda. So it may be too late to get this on their May agenda. I'm not sure. If it is, this won't go to Planning Commission until June. And then we'll come to the council after that. So we won't have anything back until 3rd or 4th week of June. unless I'm wrong on the planning commission, Shannon, you may know, but I thought there's a pretty wide window that they had to give, publish their agenda. So,
You are right on that. We could probably ask them to see if they would special call a meeting to go over these.
yeah.
And that would move us up a couple weeks. That would be an option if you guys want me to do that.
Yeah, I would just hate to lose the sort of the momentum, waiting for 2 months. And at some point, because we do have to, I think, come up with specifics, it's kind of things Lisa was talking about. That's going to take a while also.
Mhm.
But I think schedule wise, we're probably pretty far ahead of the other Clemson Next groups because we got started early. And maybe, I don't know, just what do you think about the timing of all this in terms of waiting and moving ahead? And I like the idea, Shannon, maybe PC would have a special meeting. But if they have to vote on it, they definitely have to have, 2 weeks or whatever it is notification. So,
Right. Well, that would still, even if we got it to them next week, I mean, they would still have 2 weeks. We'd still probably be 2 weeks ahead of where we would be if
right,
we waited for their June meeting.
yeah, okay.
I will go ahead and ask about that and see if that's something they're willing to do.
Yeah.
And then I will get back to all of you with that. Yeah, I mean, that's our next step, is to take these to planning commission. And if planning commission is ready to forward these to city council, they'll go to city council. I think we probably take next week off. And I will see if we might have some things we can work on in 2 weeks. I'll send out an email to everybody and let you know. Just maybe as far as starting to look at some of these where we can break down and put some strategies in there, or look at where they might go in the comp plan. If you guys are willing to do that before everything is fully adopted by council, or if you would rather wait, make sure they're all fully adopted by council and work on these then. What do y'all want to do as a committee?
Shannon, I had another thought too, though. Do you want to should we send this to Clemson Next before we send it to Planning Commission? Brookover's Wednesday morning group.
We could send it to them maybe
Information
at the same time.
only?
I can send it to them before it goes to planning commission. They're not going to meet next week.
Right.
But
Maybe
I can
just informational to them, not to vote
Yes.
on it. Yeah, okay.
I will do that.
And then maybe also if you or the chief can have some conversation with the university people somewhere along that line with Dan and Peter, whatever process you decide to do for that. But we've done great work pretty quickly, Shannon. Thanks for facilitating this. I'm not sure, but I think if by us coming first, I think, and Shannon being there, we'll make sure all of our ideas stay integrated and on the agenda of all the other committees, which is why it's good we're already out in front on this.
Yeah, this is great, you guys. I mean, this was a lot to get through and a lot of additional recommendations that were not included in the white paper. So we did some great work. Are you guys good with waiting until after council adopts these to move forward with coming up with specific strategies? Or do you want to keep meeting on a more regular basis?
Say wait until, I don't want, if council nixes half of these, which I don't think they would, but I don't want to waste my time. Let's be clear.
I think it's fine to wait. Shannon, will you keep us updated as to when they are going to go before council and planning commission, and let us know if you want any of this committee members to show up and speak and that sort of thing?
I sure will. Once I find out from planning commission, I will keep you guys updated on when these are going to be considered at planning commission and then at city council. And then at any time, if you guys would like to go speak at any of those public hearings, you are totally welcome to go speak. I will, and if they have questions, we might reconvene to have a meeting or a work session with planning commission or council if they have questions on any of our recommendations or how we got there. So part of this, because we are the first group, is trial and error. So we're just going to see how this goes and come up with a process as we work through it.
I had one last question, and what the chief put in the chat box made me think of it. Is someone on this committee representing CatBus, and or have we, should we be talking about the specific transit related recommendations with them?
I think that's a great idea. I will find someone representing CatBus to bring on to this committee.
I'm sure if we approach Sammy, he'll participate. I know he's all about doing whatever he can to expand the bus service. I had conversations with him a couple of weeks ago about other modes of transportation aside from buses, and he's all for it. So I don't think he'll hesitate at the chance.
Okay. And as we move forward through this process and we get into kind of the strategy side of things, we will be bringing more people in. And if you guys have any recommendations or thoughts on other folks we should be bringing into these meetings, let me know. I think it's a great idea to share this final draft with the university folks and let them know, that we're figuring out how we're gonna work with them so that they're not working with multiple groups. That's my one concern is I want them to know how we're sharing information and have one route for that information to go instead of it being kind of lost into separate smaller groups.
Yeah, but the only thing is though, too, if we share these, make sure it's clear that this is a draft that has not been approved by any city entity, just so we don't hear about this from some other sources, like, I don't know, newspapers. And so I have no, it's great to share it and give input, but please clarify that this has to go through a approval process that has not happened yet.
Okay, I will work with, you might get these next week then, because let me work with city staff, and make sure I use the right language and get that draft stamp on there. So expect to see these from me next week.
Shannon, I know you're aware of it too, but we are having those side meetings about just implementation of that specific part of the Green Crescent Trail on East Campus with the university, including Dan and Peter. So I'll be happy to keep us updated in this group what's going on with that. But that is one of those side meetings that our university city is very much an implementation, and it was set up by the university provost to have that meeting, and the chief of staff for the president was there for university. So it was a very good forward, but it's related to all this. So I just want to make sure that's integrated in what we're doing here, and I'll be happy to keep us up to date on that.
Great. Okay. Any other concerns or suggestions with where we are in the process?
Nice work, Shannon. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. This was super helpful. This is a great committee, and I'm glad this is the one that is working through this first. Very thoughtful.
Thank you, Shannon. Can you just real quick clarify, when are we meeting next? Which week and which meetings can we take off the calendar?
We will not meet next Friday. So let's plan on, is it the 14th would be our next one then? Let's plan on the 14th. I will send you some email communications between now and then. If there's nothing to discuss on the 14th, because we're just waiting, there's been no response or edits that need to be made, and we're just waiting on planning commission, we will probably take that one off the calendar as well. Does that work for everybody? All right. And in the meantime, if you guys have any other thoughts or ideas, feel free to send them along to me, and we'll get those incorporated into our process.
Thanks,
All right.
Shannon.
Thank you, everybody.
You.
Enjoy the week off next Friday, everybody.
Thanks.